agreeing to be a table facilitator in the Synod listening sessions. And today we want to provide for you a little bit of guidance on your role as a table facilitator. So I'd first like you to think about this really as teamwork, really as a partnership, not just me at the table facilitating a conversation, but more about all of the individuals who are collaborators in this process. So remember, you have a main facilitator or maybe two co-facilitators. Their role is to run the session. You have agreed to be a facilitator at the table. Each table will have a facilitator. Your job is to keep the conversation moving and to ask the questions at the table. You also have with you at the table, hopefully a scribe or a person who is taking notes. And then, of course, you have around the table a small number of participants that you're going to be talking with during the listening session. And so let's start first with a reminder really about what the goal of the listening session is. Our hope is to engage as many people as possible in conversation and discernment about what the Holy Spirit is asking of the church in the 21st century. We're trying to give a prayerful input on the needs of the church today and understand how do we speak about the mission of Christ to all people in the world today. And so my role as a facilitator then is to try to engage everybody at my table in that kind of conversation. People may defer, people may choose not to say anything, not to share, not to speak, and that's okay. But as a facilitator, I'm inviting them to participate in the discussion. Just a reminder that we're taking notes on what people are saying. That's the role of the scribe. We're not attributing comments to specific individuals, though. So those notes, it's not going to say Mary Smith said or Mary Smith told this particular moment. It's also not an opportunity for us to be judgmental about what people share in their comments. We're simply recording what has been said. This isn't a debate. It's not about correcting people or defending the church. It's not even a teaching moment. It really is for us at this point a listening opportunity. There certainly will be teaching moments later, moments in the coming months where we might continue to debate issues or look at possible strategies. But this here right now in these listening sessions is an opportunity to be open and to listen. So our primary mode in these sessions is dialogue. And when we speak, our goal, our purpose is to have a robust conversation that moves things forward. So remember, in a dialogue, it's not a lecture, it's a dialogue. And a dialogue is two ways. There's speaking, and then there's also listening. Another word that's really important for us to understand within this synodal journey is the word of discernment. And discernment means not necessarily taking a vote, but it's about finding commonality, common themes and patterns in our experiences and in our journey together. And ultimately, this isn't about, we have to look at the reality of the church, but it's about finding ways to move forward And in that, then we must really be listening to the Spirit and hearing, trying to hear what the Spirit is saying to us. As a facilitator, I have to always be reminding myself I don't have all of the answers. My role is not to apologize for the church or to defend the doctrine of the church. I'm not a teacher. I'm not someone who is correcting participants' understanding of the church. I'm also not a therapist. I'm there as a facilitator to encourage dialogue and listening at the table. So so what do I do as a facilitator? How do I approach this role? I think that there's 3 words that really help me to put me in the right kind of frame of mind as I come to the table. And those words are curiosity, accompaniment, and empathy. So I like to think of my role as a facilitator when I first sit down as one in which I must really encourage radical hospitality for all those who will sit with me at the table. I'm always trying to create an environment of openness where people feel comfortable in sharing. And our posture of listening, therefore, is really very critical. Are we open to listening? And more particularly, do I show curiosity in what people are sharing with me? Or do I presume that I know all the answers before the question is even asked? So I want to remain curious and open as I'm facilitating. I also want to focus on accompaniment. I genuinely want to know people better. I want to remain centered in love for my fellow human beings and those who are at the table. Pope Francis is always encouraging us to accompany one another. And I think what he really means, he's asking us to think very carefully about how we accompany people. We certainly accompany people in the words that we choose to use. We accompany them in the actions or the deeds that we undertake, but we also have a lot of nonverbal behaviors that can show accompaniment or show abandonment of others. So when we are present to people in the group, when we show curiosity, they begin to share their story with us. And that's exactly what we want. We want to hear those stories. In listening, we want to show empathy, and empathy is a little bit different from sympathy. It's actually deeper than sympathy. When we are empathetic, we are working to try to really understand the perspective of another. We want to see the world as the other person sees the world. That's what we are trying to do. Sometimes those conversations or what people are sharing may take me a little bit out of my comfort zone. Maybe those discussions or what they share might be really challenging for me. And so at those times, I like to turn to a place or bring myself to a place of wonder. And what do I mean by that? I'm working to try to set aside judgment as I'm a facilitator. And I'm asking perhaps myself the question, I wonder what my reaction teaches me about myself. I wonder if the world were different. I wonder if the church were different. I wonder if circumstances were different. I wonder what that might look like. And if I ask myself those questions, it helps me to kind of work through or navigate through perhaps a challenging discussion. Empathy is really about that ability to mutually experience thoughts and emotions and to connect with other individuals. So as a facilitator, my parish has kind of asked me to take on that role because they've recognized perhaps certain qualities. And these are some of the qualities that I try to encourage in myself, certain gifts that I try to grow in particular ways when I think of myself as a facilitator. This certainly isn't a complete list. There are probably many other qualities that we can think about, that we can talk about, but I want to just offer a few ideas here now. As facilitators, we're prayerful and more particularly also just reflective, right? Appreciating silence and really kind of thinking things through with our heart, if you will. I'm practicing skills of being a good listener. We can all become better listeners today in society. I'm trying to connect with participants and encourage discussion without becoming the center of conversation myself. And that's really very important. I have to maintain a big picture view, right? It's not about my personal agenda, my personal feelings, or my personal platform. It's about listening and engaging in conversation with others. I'm assisting in focusing the conversation and keeping the group on task. So a good quality is if I can having focus as a facilitator. I have to also be able to keep track of time and move the conversation forward. I'm always reminding myself that as a facilitator, I'm really not an authority figure. I'm not the person in charge, so to speak. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a catechist. I'm not a debater. And I'm also not a therapist when I'm in that group setting. I have a very different role. My role is to encourage others in conversation. So how, in fact, do I keep the conversation going? I'm inviting people and attentive to people's participation in the group. I'm trying to address everyone in the group and by name. I might be inviting particular individuals who might be quiet if they have anything that they'd like to share. People can get off topic. So maybe we're talking about our faith or our parish or experience within the Archdiocese of Newark, and someone all of a sudden starts talking about, I don't know, the weather or politics or something else. So as a facilitator, I'm redirecting people to get back on the topic. Maybe I'm rereading the question that we were trying to discuss. I am making sure that an opening space for others to share, especially if one person is sharing too much or dominating the conversation. I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. So I may need to open up that space for others. Some of these questions, no doubt, are very challenging to understand or to figure out an answer to those questions. And so I may have to sort of rephrase some of those questions. And in that way, I'm becoming familiar with those questions before I get to the table, reading them through and thinking about how I might rephrase something if individuals are struggling with how to answer those questions. And finally, I'm creating space for silence and reflection. Again, these questions are very challenging. So I want to give people at my table a quiet time to really think before they respond. And ultimately, I want to be listening more than I am speaking. I'm also attentive to body language of the participants in my group, and you can tell by body language if they're not feeling comfortable, or if they want to say something or they don't want to say something. But I also need to be attentive about my own body language. I have to admit that as I facilitate groups, I'm a big head nodder, or I give lots of verbal cues, and I need to be very attentive of that. I actually need to dial it back a little bit. But I also do want to be encouraging, but I need to be encouraging to everybody. So maybe somebody's sharing a story, and I can become overly enthusiastic because that's exactly my point of view as well. But I need to remember that I'm there to encourage everybody. So I'm not just trying to agree with those folks who share my own opinions or viewpoints, but I'm there to encourage everybody. So these are some important guidelines. I'd encourage you to share this with everyone at your table. There is a facilitator guide online on the Archdiocesan website, and these guidelines can be found in that document. So I'm hoping that your parishes or those who are hosting the listening session will make these available to you. But really, we're trying to create an environment where everyone feels comfortable to speak. So we're really, this is our group etiquette, or what we're all agreeing to at the table. We're not creating a space for debate or really strategic planning at this point. We're not correcting people as they share. We're having a dialogue. So we're treating each person with respect, and we're actually reverencing what is shared by each individual. One person speaks at a time, so we're not having satellite conversations at the table. Each person is limiting how long he or she speaks. Remember, you have a number of individuals at the table. We want everybody to have an opportunity to talk. There's lots of questions and a limited amount of time. So in estimating, we're thinking that each person, if each person is speaking and addressing each question, they may only have 2 or 3 minutes to provide an answer in the session. So keep that in mind. We're listening with an open mind, and we're listening for understanding rather than listening to make a response to each individual at the table. We're avoid arguing or comments that seek to advance a personal agenda. And we only speak once until everyone has had an opportunity to share. So these are really very important guidelines for us to try to stick to. Again, this what you see on the screen now are guidelines for table sharing. We provided this to the parishes. It's actually on the Archdiocesan website. We know that some parishes are making copies of this, and a copy will be in the center of the table, just as a reminder to everyone as you sit there and begin the conversation to be aware of the time allotted. Pause briefly between the speakers, give people an opportunity to kind of collect their thoughts. Provide an opening for others to share, speak clearly and with respect, be an open-minded listener, be attentive and reflective at the table. So again, some thoughts on group etiquette to keep in mind. As a facilitator, I may need to ask follow-up questions. Remember, there is a scribe who is taking notes, and so sometimes this is essential or important to help the person who's taking the notes. And there's 3 different types of follow-up questions that I may ask. Questions that are meant to get more details, questions on elaboration, and questions for clarifications. So with the details, I might ask participants to fill out the picture a little bit more. I'm showing my curiosity in this way about what they shared. I might, if they share a story, I might be asking a question like, so who exactly was with you, or when did that happen? Was that like 20 years ago, or is that a more recent experience? Those are examples of detail-oriented questions. There might also be questions for elaboration, right? To share more about what they just gave in conversation to the group. I might say something like, can you give me an example of what you're talking about? So they might have made a general kind of a comment to the question, and you might want them to go a little bit deeper and to provide an example on what they're referring to. And finally, clarification. I might gently ask for clarification. I may say something like, I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you've just shared. Would you describe it for me again? So again, it's important as a facilitator sometimes to restate what you heard, to make sure that there's a good general understanding of what someone has just shared. So at the table, what do we hear? And I'm hoping that we're not listening with just one ear like this bunny, but actually listening with both ears. Remember at the beginning, I said we're part of a team. So you're working not only with the scribe at your table, but also your table participants. We're looking for those themes or those patterns in discussion, that commonality. There may be other ideas or things that are shared that are vitally important, maybe something about our parish specifically that is important for our pastor to know, but maybe it's not so important to share with the Archdiocese, or it's not going to go in our final notes that will be compiled and sent on to the diocese and then to Rome. So we can put those ideas maybe in a parking lot, if you will. Important for us to know locally, not so important for the Archdiocese or for the Pope. So think about using that idea of a parking lot. There may be specific direct quotes or a short story that somebody shares about their experience that you think really captures the entire essence of the table conversation. So feel free to kind of jot that down or to share that story in the notes moving forward. Remember, though, you don't have to attribute that story to one specific individual. You don't have to say Mary Smith told the following story. And ultimately, we're trying to summarize. So again, as the facilitator or the scribe work together, you might be repeating back the main ideas. You might say, okay, this is what we're hearing, and this is what we're going to write down in our notes that we're going to share. It's not the facilitator or the scribe alone who's deciding what the priority is from the conversation. You're all working together in that way. So this is a sample. This is what the note form looks like for the scribe. Remember, at the very beginning, we're asking you to just do a quick sort of a demographic understanding of who's at each table, who is here. That's really very important to us, right? Are we hearing the voice of a younger generation? Are we hearing do we have a diversity of voices at the table? So we're asking your help. Please don't spend a great deal of time on this demographic question. It's really a quick inventory. Remember our overall timeline. There's a tremendous amount for us to get through. So just be mindful of that time. But we do want to understand who's present at these listening sessions. And then, of course, that follow-up question is who is missing from the conversation? And that's really important. If we don't know who is present, we can't ever then answer that other question of who was missing and how do we continue to have conversations with the folks that we're missing. This is this is like the second, third, fourth page. For the note takers, just want you to be familiar with that. And you're discerning as a group, what are those three examples that we want to share with the main facilitator and with our parish moving forward. So I'd like to end with a quote that I think really summarizes both our role and responsibility as table facilitators, but also hopefully our experience in these listening sessions. This quote comes from the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry. We want to thank them for their good work. A few years ago, Christina Lamas and the team worked on the national dialogue, and they really developed excellent facilitator resources, and they permitted us to use some of their thoughts and ideas. But this quote is directly from them: listen with your heart and speak with your soul. So we encourage you to use that as you gather together in your communities, as you talk and as you listen to one another. Thank you.